Hey guys, Michael J. Crawford here, and this is just going to be a quick off-the-cuff reaction to Manu Antarami's Twitter post. Oh man. And honestly, I don't follow him anymore. I haven't for some time, but the reason that I knew about it at all was because Bird of Prey 5 posted a reaction video to it, and so because of that, I checked out the original Twitter post. And for those of you that don't know, Manu is the person who played Icheb on Voyager, and Bird and I had the dubious pleasure of participating in a panel discussion with Manu on PJ Orville Nation's channel, in which we got to talk to him about a variety of subjects, including the fact that he kind of got snubbed in he didn't get the opportunity to play Icheb on Picard when Icheb was brought back for kind of a cameo appearance. But here is Manu's post on Twitter that came about 13 hours ago as of the recording of this video. And before I get into the actual content of this post and my thoughts on it, I gotta say, and I think this is absolutely hilarious, is the first thing I notice is, why does this seem so darn familiar? And then it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. It's because Manu stole that image from none other than our old friend Steve Shives. Yes, this is a year-old video from Steve Shives, What Do Conservatives Actually Like About Star Trek, where Steve Shives was basically just saying the exact same garbage that Manu is saying here. Which is typical thinking, and I'm going to echo a little bit of what I said back then about this, but what Manu says here is that conservative Star Trek fans make me sick. What is it about this obviously liberal, all in cap shows? Do you think that right-wing Christian conservatives, do you think fits the right-wing Christian conservative worldview? If you are a right-winger Trek fan, you're about as confused as a fart in a fan factory. And so, wow. So first of all, you know, it's funny because there's been a concerted effort, it seems, in recent weeks from various Star Trek sources to attack conservatives lately. We've seen it from Tim Russ, we've seen it from Will Wheaton, and now we see it from Manu. And I think it's kind of interesting that all these Star Trek alum are attacking conservatives all at once. I don't know if this is a coordinated effort or just a coincidence, but whatever. You know, that if you want to alienate a considerable amount of your fan base, not a good idea, but you go right ahead. Just a dumb thing to do, to be honest, because as it is, the Star Trek fan base is teetering on a razor's edge as far as whether or not they're going to continue on being Star Trek fans, myself included among that. I've said that, you know, honestly, whether or not I'm going to continue to call myself a Trekkie is in large part going to depend on whether or not Strange New Worlds is any good. And if Strange New Worlds sucks, I may, you know, hang up my hat and just no longer consider myself a Trek fan and move on with my life. And I hate saying that. But this type of attitude from the creatives behind Trek isn't helping that any. And I don't really consider myself a conservative. And this is not helping at all. And so let me address a little bit of what Manu is talking about here. And where I come from on the political spectrum. I've said before, and for the record, what I call myself is an anti-ideologist. I do not I don't follow a specific ideology. I'm not a Republican. I am not a Democrat. I am not affiliated with any political party. I do not follow a conservative ideology or a liberal ideology. If there is a particular political issue, I will look at the issue and I will decide for myself how I personally think that we should deal with that issue. And if it's something that's in an election, I will vote accordingly. If it's not something that's in an election, I will argue accordingly. But that's just how I deal with things. I'm not going to sit there and say, well, because I'm a conservative and the conservative thing to do is X, that I'm going to go with X. Now, I will say that Manu did attack me directly in that I am a Christian. And in some of Manu's comments, when responding to some of the things that people have said, he does go on to say that, oh, well, Jesus isn't coming down on a cloud to relieve us of our problems. And it's like, well, if that's what you think the Bible says, Manu, you're woefully ignorant of what the Bible says. So let me just say, yeah, I don't believe that either. And I don't know a single Christian that does believe that. Why don't you pick up a Bible and read it before you start talking about what you think we actually believe? Because you just sound like an idiot when you start spouting crap like that. Okay? As far as why do Christians or why do conservatives actually like Star Trek? Well, it kind of depends on which Trek you're talking about, because with the original series, conservative Christians have a whole lot to like. First of all, in the original series, Christianity is all over the place. God and the Bible are referenced throughout the original series. And in fact, you could argue that the Federation in the original series is quite conservative. So it's not really all that, there's really not all that to argue against. Now, while you could say that the original series is quite progressive for its day because it's obviously shows racial equality and a lot of things that you wouldn't normally expect for its day from the 1960s. This is something that the modern day liberal, like Manu, does not seem to grasp. And this is a problem. And I don't know if it's a problem with our educational system or if it's just willful ignorance among modern liberals like Manu and others like him. And that is that progressive and liberal are not synonymous. They don't mean the same thing. And so one can have a progressive goal and not be a liberal. And so, for example, one can want racial equity and be fiscally conservative. Those are not mutually exclusive terms. And so I think that Manu is, unfortunately, and many of his ilk, simply completely ignorant of these terms. And it's not, I'm sure it's not a matter of intelligence. I don't think that Manu is intellectually incapable of understanding these terms. I just don't think that he is properly educated on these terms. And I think that a lot of his fellow liberals are equally ignorant because they simply believe, because liberals have kind of co-opted the term progressive as meaning liberal, so they just think that if something is progressive, it naturally is liberal. Then there's also the problem of the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation, and that in the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation in particular, where Gene Roddenberry had the most creative control, that is where we do actually see exactly the kind of Star Trek that Manu is talking about. That's where Star Trek is very blatantly liberal, and where and aggravatingly so, very preachy, and just annoyingly so. And most conservatives that I know find the first season to 2 seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation to be unbearable. And so at that point, yeah, I'll grant you. However, then Gene Roddenberry lost creative control, and the show got much, much better. And you can then see in Deep Space Nine, the show again took a much more conservative bent. And in fact, the interesting thing about Deep Space Nine is that capitalism reared its ugly head, as you might say. And despite the fact that Star Trek was supposed to be, according to Gene Roddenberry, this anti-capitalistic ideal, where, oh yeah, the Federation has evolved beyond the need for money, and we have this post-scarcity economy and all this stuff. Well, guess what? That was boring. And so they brought in characters like Quark, and they actually had Quark explain to Sisko how the Ferengi had a much less violent history than humans, that the Ferengi were better than humans. And so we actually got some really good stuff where capitalists, the purely capitalist race, the Ferengi, showed their strengths in Deep Space Nine. Now, in Voyager, they kind of stayed apolitical for the most part, and also in Enterprise. And I'll be completely honest with you, I'm not, as far as the later era Trek from 2009 on, there it kind of just became about identity politics more than anything else. Everything else just suddenly became unimportant, particularly when we're looking at Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard. It's just like the only thing that seems to matter is identity politics. Everything else is just thrown by the wayside, and to much to the detriment of the shows. And the storytelling has just been abysmal as a direct result. I'm hoping that with Strange New Worlds, they turn it around. We shall see. But as far as the first 2 generations of Trek, meaning the original series era through the Next Generation era, yeah, there's a lot for conservatives to like. There's absolutely a lot for conservatives to like. And there's a lot for Christians to like. Now, granted, there's much less for Christians to like in the Next Generation era than the original series era. But it's there. And the main thing, the underlying principle that guides Trek in those first 2 generations of Trek, that is really the fundamental, most important thing, is that it is a truly realized egalitarian society. And egalitarianism is, unfortunately, in the modern day, a liberal's absolute nightmare, at least a far left liberal like yourself. Unfortunately, in the modern era, liberals do not like the idea of egalitarianism. They much prefer the idea that we control who succeeds and who fails, as opposed to letting individuals' strengths and weaknesses determine who succeeds and fails. Now, I personally believe in an egalitarian society, but I also believe that because of systemic problems in our society, we need to make drastic changes to our education system and stuff before we can possibly get there. And unfortunately, I don't think that our current political climate, that anybody has the guts to make the kind of changes to our educational system that need to be made. But that's just my personal opinion. And but in Trek, the beauty of it is that we've achieved this egalitarian society, that anybody can be successful if they're willing to put in the effort and they have the necessary skills. Sure, you have to have the talent as well. And so, yes, Captain Kirk is a success, not only because he put in the effort, but because he is talented. And so, sure, someone else who's not as talented is not going to be as successful. And some people might view that as unfair, and that's where liberals don't like it. But that's ultimately where it's fair as far as the state treating everybody equally. And that's what I think the ultimate society should be. A society where the state treats everyone equally. But that's, like I said, something that liberals don't like. Conservatives tend to like that. And that's something that Star Trek reflects. And again, Manu, that's something that conservatives can like about Star Trek. So that's some actual answers to your question. I'm sure you're not going to bother to watch this video because you're probably just going to think that I'm some raving hate monster because I disagree with you. After all, anybody that disagrees with a liberal must be hatey. Man, I really am not working right. And that's actually another problem, is that this is something we've been doing a lot lately, and something that we talked about the other day on my live stream, is that with the inherent tribalism that we've been pushing in our society, that we've been separating ourselves into these groups, and particularly left and right, liberal and conservative. And so therefore we tend to think that if you're not a part of our group, then you're automatically some kind of hate monger, or you automatically hate X. There's something that you must hate. And so, if you're not a liberal, you must hate whatever it is that you think that conservatives hate, whether it be women or gays or fill in the blank, whatever it is. You think that people that disagree with you politically must hate something. And honestly, how about you just have a conversation rather than just make these horrible assumptions about people, and rather than think that people make you sick because they're conservative and they like Star Trek, how about you just say, hey, you're conservative and you like Star Trek, how come? How about you start with that instead of saying you make me feel sick? Huh, Manu? Take care.